One thing I neglected to say in church that I should have is that I took this role beginning August 1st, 2015, and before that, for 7 years, I was the rector of St. Paul's in Riverside. So I know Fairfield County. I knew John very well as a colleague, and of course I knew Whitney as well as a colleague for the short time that she was here. So I am not in foreign territory this morning. And I'm very glad to be here, and I will tell you, I'm in a different place every Sunday. It's not very often I get to enjoy the music I enjoyed this morning, and I thank you for that. It's wonderful. As a former choir person, I really appreciated it. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about what's going to be happening here at Christ in the Holy Trinity. And we start with where we are today, and we are, of course, living in the aftermath of Whitney's departure. And Whitney's departure was what we call a complicated departure, in that it was unanticipated, undesired, I think, for most people. It was confusing for a lot of people, and it was and is disruptive. You all, are used to long tenured people. To have somebody come and stay for such a short amount of time and to leave so quickly is disturbing to the system in place here. The other thing is, so if your next leader, whoever it will be your fourth ordained leader in 5 years. That's a lot. You had John, you had an interim, Ben, you have Whitney, and then you'll have this person. And that is a lot of change and stress on any system, particularly for staff, and particularly for just people who like church to kind of go along and be what they expect. We're living, though, in anxious times, just like trying to kind of understand Jesus' little sayings this morning had to be put in the context of the larger story. Your particular situation needs to be put in context of the larger story as well, acknowledging that anxiety seems to be in the water, that people are just anxious. Even if everything were going great here, we would still have a lot of anxiety in the system because it just is where we are as a culture today. And the church is not immune from that anxiety and that changing. And in fact, we are in the midst of a huge change going on for the church as a whole. The truth is, the 20th century church, the church that we know and love, and I am a lifelong Episcopalian, is in fact dying. We no longer occupy the position of privilege that we had in society. People don't set aside Sunday morning for church anymore. The stores are not closed on Sunday anymore. And we actually haven't really had that position for close to 50 years now. It's just taken us a while to notice what was happening and to accept the fact that it is, in fact, a real change. Since 2005, active membership in the Episcopal Church has dropped 19%. So over the last 10 years, we have lost 19% of our members, and there's no reason to think that that will not continue. It's mostly about demographics. As you might have noticed, we are an aging group. We don't have the proportion of the younger people in church as we do of the older generations, and as people die, our membership drops, and actuarially, that's where we're headed. Average Sunday attendance is down 26% over the last 10 years, which means that not only are we losing members, but people's definition of what it means to be a regular church member, I'm sure you've noticed, is not being in church every Sunday. People consider themselves regular churchgoers now if they go once every 4 to 6 weeks. And this is happening, I want to point out, after 40 years of church growth programs. Our population, our membership started to drop in the late 1960s. So we're looking at 50 years now. It's been going on. And we kind of noticed it in the 1980s. And our response was a variety of church growth programs. If we just do this, more people will come. If we just don't do that, more people will come. And the fact of the matter is, none of it has worked. So this is where we are. Maybe God is trying to tell us something. Perhaps God is calling us away from business as usual. And business as usual for the last 50, 60 years pretty much was concentrated on building up the church. Rectors of John Branson's generation, the predecessors in all the parishes where I've served generation, their formation was totally based around doing what is going to add more people and more money to the parish. And we think God may well be calling us away from that model. And priests today that are coming out of seminary, I graduated from seminary in 2001, so I know at least I was formed, and every priest after me was formed, not to be focused on building up the church, but in fact to be focusing on God and God's mission. Because if our faith is in the church, we're putting it in the wrong place. So God seems to be calling us to move into something different, and we don't know what that is, but it's going to look different from the church that we currently know and love. And God is calling us to a different type of leadership, a leadership that is focused on God and God's mission, and not on growing or maintaining the 20th century church. God is, in fact, reminding us who we are, to stop being so worried about the survival of the church. The church is of God. If it's supposed to survive, God will make sure it survives. But we are not an organization with business to do. We are a community formed for faithfulness to God and to God's mission. Not an institution to be maintained, a part of the Jesus movement. And if you're wondering where that expression came from, I give you the Most Reverend Michael Curry, presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church.
We've been talking for a little over a year now about being the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. And somebody recently said to me, as a bishop, why don't you paint us a picture? Give us a picture of the Jesus movement so that we can see it. When the gospel is about to be read, the congregation stands up. Something is going on. And then more than that, as the gospel moment is approaching, a deacon, if there is a deacon in the particular church, a person who has been ordained to be at the intersection of the church and the world, is asked to read or chant the gospel. And they come down sometimes with a gospel book held high. And there's music, and the congregation is singing as the gospel of Jesus, the teachings, the life and the spirit of Jesus enter, in a sense, the room through the reading of the gospel. And then on top of that, everyone in the room turns and reorients from wherever they are. They turn and reorient themselves facing the place of the gospel and stand for the reading of the gospel, for hearing the teachings of Jesus. That gospel moment, the church has become the Jesus movement, with life reoriented around the teachings of Jesus and around his very spirit. Teachings and a spirit that embody the love of God in our lives and in this world. A way of love that seeks the good and the well-being of the other before the self's own unenlightened interest. A way of love that is not self-centered, but other-directed. A way of love grounded in compassion and goodness and justice and forgiveness. It is that way of love that is the way of Jesus. And that way of love that can set us all free. Someone once said, when you look at Jesus, you see one who is loving, one who is liberating, and one who is life-giving. And that is what the way of Jesus is about. And that is the movement of Jesus. A community of people committed to living the way of Jesus, loving, liberating, and life-giving, and committed to going into the world to help this world become one that is loving, liberating, and life-giving. Jesus once said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, 42nd Street and 3rd Avenue, you will be my witnesses. Witnesses to a way that is loving, liberating, and life-giving. And that, my friends, can change this world.
So I appreciate Louis' announcement this morning. This man is an incredible preacher. You have the opportunity to hear him preach in Hartford at our 10:30 service on Sunday, November 20th. You really want to take advantage of that opportunity, and we do expect to have a waiting list. You can go to the diocesan website, to the calendar, and click on, you need a ticket. You can click on how to register and get an electronic ticket for that event. So this is where we are as a church. It's where we're trying to go as the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. And you all made a decision to go with this model of church, the Jesus movement, when you called Whitney. You made a huge generational leap going from John to Whitney. You called a priest who was formed to do the culture change work here in Westport and here at Christ in the Holy Trinity. And she came and intended to be doing that work with you, and for whatever reason, it did not happen. So we are not going to just pretend that that is normal, that life should go on as usual, and have you take the time and energy to go into a rector search. You will have instead a priest in charge, and this is a decision made by the bishops. A priest in charge gives a parish time and space to attend to whatever is stressing the system before you call a tenured rector. It doesn't mean you're not going to call a tenured rector, it just means you're not going to call a tenured rector now. But you need somebody in place for a little while. Priests in charge help us resist the urge to move anxiously into simple fixes, which is just human nature and human tendencies. A priest in charge encourages prayerful attentiveness to God's calls to us and keeps the focus on whatever questions God may be calling the parish to explore. A priest in charge is a bishop's appointment. A rector is called by a search committee, rather by a vestry, after work done by a search committee or a transition team. But the bishop has to approve a rector call, and in fact our bishops, to my knowledge, have never not approved one. A priest in charge is a bishop's appointment. You are sent candidates and one at a time to interview and to the vestry, and then the vestry tells the bishop whether they want that person or want another candidate. A priest in charge helps you figure out the work that you need to do to move faithfully into God's future. We don't have that work laid out. We just know there's work to do here. The priest in charge does that work with you, assisted by a consultant who is also appointed by the bishop. And the bishop works with the vestry to set goals for the priest in charge time. And we use a 3-year timeline, but that's just because that is normally the amount of time it takes to do the kind of deep work that needs to be done. It's possible that you'll do it faster. It's also possible it could take you a little longer. But assuming you have 3 years and working with that, what do you want to get done over those 3 years with this person? And that goal setting is done with input from the congregation. The PIC is your guide, and for this part of Christ and the Holy Trinity's journey toward faithful participation in God's mission, that is what our focus is on. What needs to happen here so that the tremendous gifts and graces that are present in this congregation, in this community, can be in fact leashed for God's purposes and God's mission. As I said, the normal time is 3 years. When the goals are met, and that is determined by your vestry working with the PIC, the consultant, me, and the bishops, you can call a rector. And you can either, if the PIC, you and the bishop all agree that it's a good fit and you want to continue, your PIC can convert to becoming your tenured rector. If any of those 3 parties say this isn't working, we don't want to continue, that relationship will end. The PIC normally then converts to an interim, and you do a quick search because you've done a lot of the discernment work over the course of your PIC time, and you can call somebody completely different at that point. So you can go into the traditional transition at that point and call somebody new. So this is about helping you become the parish that we think God is calling you to be, whatever that may be, figuring that out. It is about God's mission. It is not about what the easiest thing to do is, and we're asking you to be part of some really important work so that, in fact, we can be ways of bringing a world that is loving, liberating, and life-giving about. That's where our focus is. So what kinds of questions do you have for me right now? Yes?
Here, I'll pass this around.
Hi.
Leanne doesn't know everybody, so just say your name.
Hi, Leanne.
Hi.
Claire O'Connor.
Hi, Claire.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
I was not part of the search committee the last time, but it seems to me that the search committee did a lot of work in terms of discernment, and really, you know, some of the work that you're talking about. So I'm interested to know what the difference is, because you talk about a lot of the work that we as a community need to be doing. Can you put any sort of definition or scope around that work and how that might differ from the work that was done previously?
Well, first of all, the work that you'll be doing now, you'll be doing from a different place. You know, because we're moving, and now you're looking at yourselves after the experience of having the interim and Whitney here for the short time that she was here. Also, what happened with Whitney was not what anybody expected or I think wanted. And what was that about? What happened? There needs to be some exploration of that and some ownership of whatever the situation is. Was it possible that calling somebody who'd never been a rector before was not a good idea? Was it possible that when you do that, there should be support in place and it wasn't in place? Was Whitney just not up to the job? But we're not interested in assigning blame. And certainly in a situation like this, there is responsibility on the whole system's part. It's not about blaming anybody. But something did not go well. And until we stop and look at that, decide what we need to do differently going forward, you have the risk of doing that again. We don't want that to happen. You all are too good for that. You have too much to give to God and to the world to get bogged down in repeating behavior that isn't getting the results that you want. So that's what we're focused on. But that's not all, I mean, you'll figure out some other things you want to do too, but that's what's different about this time versus last time. Yes, sir?
Randy Abrams, I have 2 questions.
Yes.
One of them is, who are these PICs, and are they floating around in some foster in the universe? Waiting to be PICs, number 1. And number 2 is, I was in a vestry that called Whitney. I know how hard it was to get it down to 2 names in the end. You know, it's for what we wanted and what we got was like here. And it's really so difficult to get someone that you really think fit. And listen, honestly, I think Whitney was good. There's a whole bunch of things that just missed and didn't work. And you know, you touched on some things, but it's so hard to get a rector. and you have this priest in charge, and I mean, I don't know how you. I guess the PIC is a mechanism to get you to a point where you're ready to do this again. But it's so hard to fix someone in the first place. I wonder, are we going to go through PIC for 3 years and then go through the same thing again that we did last time? Gnashing for another 18 months to try and figure out how to do this.
Yeah. First of all, we don't need to unpack what happened today. So, that is work to do, and I'm not interested in doing that work today. And we don't want you to do the same thing again. That's the whole reason we're going to take this pause and try to get to a different place and be able to do that work from a different place. There is absolutely no question that work has gotten harder because there are frankly fewer and fewer clergy. Parishes are, just like members are dropping, people no longer see this as a valid career option. And the fact of the matter is, parishes like Christ and the Holy Trinity, as Louis will tell you, that can pay a full-time salary are getting to be the minority rather than the majority of parishes. To ask a young person to do, what Whitney did requires a lot of faith in God.